I guess every photographer at some point wants to do a book of their work. I know I did something that I thought, okay, one of these days I'm going to put this together as a book, and you know, the options are, you know, a publisher or do it yourself, and a lot of times that's an expensive process because it's usually done with offset press, and that's expensive. You can't do a short run. You have to do longer runs to keep the prices down so you can sell them and make a profit off of it. So what I'll start with, and of course there's a lot of information in this because to self-publish a book, it's quite a journey, and I had never done this before. I literally had to learn what to do as far as the design, dealing with the printer, and you know, selling it and everything. I mean, it was having to do everything rather than rely on a traditional publisher. So how the project kind of came to be was about 7 years ago. I was shooting, see, here's where I said I was going to lose my train of thought. It started 7 years ago. I was on a photo shoot in eastern New Mexico, and I happened to be staying in Tucumcari that night, and when I drove into town, there was this section of Route 66 that I happened to be on, and all the lights of the cafe and motels were on and everything, and I hadn't seen anything like that since I was a kid. Back in the 70s, we'd take trips in the station wagon, and I thought, wow. So I got out and I took photographs of what I saw that evening. And so anyway, from that kind of piqued my interest about Route 66. So I thought, well, I'll shoot things wherever I can, because where I live in Amarillo is kind of the midway point between Chicago and Los Angeles. And so every little road trip that I'd be on, if there was a section of Route 66, I would stop and take photographs. And so this just kind of went on for several years. And then in the summer of 2005, my daughter and I took a trip to Los Angeles. And so I thought, okay, there's some places I certainly want to hit on this trip. So I kind of had mapped out specific areas where I was going to shoot. And so that's probably where I made the first serious images that are in the book now. And anyway, so I shot that, and my wife and I made a trip the following fall. We went east to visit her dad in Missouri for Thanksgiving. And so I shot some places along the east section of Route 66. And in the summer of 2009, I got an email from this guy in Las Vegas who puts together hotel and casino interiors. And he was looking for specifically black and white photographs of Route 66 to put in 60 new suites that the Hard Rock Cafe hotel and casino was going to do. And so that forced me to really look at what I had. And so I was going through all the images that I'd shot, and I was like, wow, I've got almost enough stuff here for a book. And so I kind of looked through everything. I sent him, you know, a selection of stuff, and they did ultimately license 4 images, and I have yet to be to Las Vegas to see these prints and the 60 suites that they put them in. So I thought, well, with a more kind of concerted effort, both directions, east and west, I can shoot enough to make this a complete project. So over the course of the next couple of years, I made trips both east and west to get enough images to do an entire book. And so at the end of, I put this out in 11, so towards the summer of, or end of 2010, I thought I had enough images and started to put it together. Now, up to the point before this, when I decided that I had enough images, I did a test book. And I'm sure most of you have heard of Blurb, which is an on-demand book printer. And up to that point, I'd never used them before. I heard, you know, some good things, some bad things, but I thought, well, I'll put together a 20-page test book. And they had released a 12-inch by 12-inch version, and that's what I wanted. I wanted something that was, you know, large, and since I shoot square, you know, that's perfect. And so I sent in, put it together on their little online software, and 2 weeks later I got the book back, and I actually made an announcement on my photo blog about it. And I was pretty pleased with what I saw, and I thought, okay, so I'll go forward with that. So we jump ahead, and I've got all the images. I'm kind of starting to edit them and figure out what I'm going to do. So I start selecting the images and put together kind of a preliminary design and layout of the book. And so I went ahead that fall of 2010 and put together a 40-page, more kind of concrete version of the book. And again, did another test book through Blurb. And it looked good. I was happy with what I saw. One of the things that I did was I compared what I was getting printed to other photographic books that I had. One of them particularly, which was the same size and basically the same page count, is The Blue Man by Keith Carter. And I thought, if I can get my photographs to look as good as the ones in that book, which were printed, offset, I would be happy. I thought if I can get close to that quality, I'd be pretty happy. And they were pretty close. And so I did the test and got it back. That was all good. And then I went to lay out the entire thing. That probably took me 3 months to do that. And it's not easy when you shoot hundreds of photographs and you've got to distill it down to 160 pages. And it was nerve-wracking because you would have these pictures you just loved, and you thought this is going to be in the book, and then you get to laying them out and you realize you're like, well, I'm just going to have to cut it. And so over the process of that layout, you kind of get a feel for how you want the images to look. And when I was working on this, one of the things is I wanted the photographs to look as if they could have been shot 50 years ago. I had looked at a lot of books about Route 66, and that's another thing. When you're wanting to work on a book, look at other photographic books, and I'm sure most people do, especially as photographers. You've got photography books because that's kind of how you see other people's work. And looking at how they're laid out and how they design them, and I did a lot of that research. And I wanted it to be really simple, kind of again like The Blue Man. It was just a very simple book. There's no descriptions. It's just simply a journey from Chicago to LA. And I wanted the pictures to have kind of a cinematic and kind of nostalgic look about them. So there was this conscious effort to shoot them this way. I avoided anything modern day in the pictures. If there was, a shot and there was, stuff like a new car or anything that looked like today, I would stay away from it and not shoot it. This was shot in Gallup, New Mexico. And of course, off in the distance, you've got cars and stuff out of focus. But a lot of the images were what I call happy accidents. The evening that we showed up, we literally, we kind of spent time waiting for the sun to go down. And you get this great storm clouds, and it rained, and so you get the nice wet streets, and the motel sign just lit up, and it was just, being in the right place at the right time. So here I go, I lost my train of thought again.
Could you go back?
Sure.
In the lower left, it looks like there's an old-fashioned car driving down the road.
In that, yeah, you're right, it does.
That may be a double.
Yeah, it almost does, doesn't it? Yeah, and it's funny you point that out. Now, I think it actually may have been a truck.
Yeah, I don't
but
know.
Yeah,
it looks like an old.
It does. That looks like a Model T or something. Yeah, I won't. No. So, and again, this was probably one of the first images that I shot for the book, and that's at the TP Motel or the Wigwams, as they call them, in Holbrook, Arizona. And this guy has all these old cars parked out in front of the teepees, and. But so anyway, so you're going through having to lay out all these photographs. And I took a class at Santa Fe Workshops in 2004, I think. And one of the things I learned was how to edit and put images together so that they flow. And that's one of the big issues that you kind of have to tackle to make the book kind of flow. This particular series right here, and this is actually a page in the book, is 2 facing pages. And this is kind of simple. You've got, you know, both gas stations and stuff, but you look for elements that are kind of similar. You've got the white columns and the white doorway, and of course they're both gas stations and everything, and you've got these details and stuff, but you've got the windows and the open doorway and just kind of things like that, that when people look through the book, you kind of follow those similar details and elements. And if you look through other photography books, you can kind of do that too. You can kind of look and see what is making that book flow, what images go into the next. And most of the pages will be like this. They'll be where you've got two photographs. And then if you want to do a break, you have a blank page, and then you've got another image. And that image actually has nothing to do with the last two you were looking at. So you're making a break and you're going into something new. And this is Gemini Giant. This is right outside of Chicago and Wilmington. And so you go to the next page, and then you've got another element similar. You've got the guy, but now he's holding a hot dog, and you've got the cozy dog drive-in, so you've got other similar elements. So there you can make a transition to a different series, but still you've got similar elements. Again, this is a similar thing. You've got the roundness of the barn, the roundness of the car and the headlights, and you've got these great skies. The other interesting thing too, when I was laying this out, was it was like a puzzle, looking at the different images and how they went together. And since it had to follow from beginning to the end of the route, and when I first started, I thought, how am I going to put this together? Because I saw a lot of books where they would put them together as like motel section, and then you've got cafe section. And I kind of thought about that at first, but once I started putting it together, I thought, no, it needs to start at the beginning of Route 66 in Chicago and end in Los Angeles. And so these images are geographically very close to each other. This is actually just down the road from the Round Barn in Arcadia, but they were taken years apart. I took this one. This was one of the first trips that we took east when I shot this. This was shot 4 years later. And, you know, and when I was like, wow, it's almost like I planned to do it. And so many of the images did that. They just fell together as if I had planned to put them together like that. Again, another one, you've got similar elements. You've got the giant pop bottle there, and then you've got the bowling pin. And of course, these are the same way. This is in Arcadia. This is in Oklahoma City. This is new. Pops is a new Route 66 establishment that really carries the look and feel of the old vintage buildings and architecture. And this has been on Route 66 for a long time, although it's now gone. The summer I shot that, they tore it down 2 weeks later and they auctioned the sign off. So that was the other important thing, was not only was it shooting this in a particular manner, but it was also saving it because it's gone. So much of it every day, there's something on Route 66 disappears, whether it's just because it's old and it's falling apart or because they just plant something new over it. And the further from about Texas all the way to the east or west coast, to Los Angeles, more of that is preserved, but the further east you go towards Chicago, it's just been overwhelmed by growth and everything. This is another image where I particularly, specifically, wanted these two images to play off of each other. So I went and shot this, and these are geographically the same. Again, this is gone. The rattlesnake sign is gone. And that was actually one of the first images I ever shot before I knew I was going to do this as a book. And towards the end, we went back to, and this is in McLean. And it's kind of a mirror image, but you got the similar elements of the poles and the horizon and the grass in the parking lot and the grass in the field, and just kind of a sense of, and that really kind of captures the Texas Panhandle where that's at. It's just open and empty and kind of desolate. And then each chapter or state starts with a break, the state's name, and I wanted a strong image to open each state. And when I was laying it out, one of the things that I came across was that each one that I really liked had clouds. So every state you go into has got some really great clouds in it. This one, this Indian, I chased down. He used to be in front of a car dealership in Clinton, Oklahoma. and he was gone when I went to photograph him. And I found out a couple years later they had moved him up Route 66 at an Indian trading post. And the morning I went to go shoot it, we had this great, it rained and the clouds cleared and it looks like he's parting the sky. So this one's kind of out of the geographic space of the flow of the book, but it was a good image, and I thought it would be great for Oklahoma since they have all the Indian things and reservations there. Again, some images, they're just a strong image, and you want them on a single page where they don't compete with anything else. This one, again, another happy accident. I'd wanted to incorporate a 1957 Bel Air somewhere in the book because that's just kind of synonymous with, you know, Route 66, the old cars and everything. The evening we drove to Tucumcari to shoot that motel sign, these people were staying there and they agreed to park that car underneath the sign. And so it just, again, another happy accident. And the nice thing about images like that throughout the book is it's kind of a signature image. It's one of those that people remember. Okay, now we'll get to talking about adjusting the images for the book. Now I'm going to look at my notes here to see if I've gone over. What if I've forgotten anything? One of the big things that you're going to have to do is adjust the images for print. When I was talking about the Keith Carter book, one of the main things that when I would read on forums, especially people dealing with blurb, was that they would put this book together, they would get it back, and it wouldn't look anything like their photographs. Part of that is the way blurb works. The other part of it is not understanding the process of preparing an image to be printed in a book. No photograph is ever going to look like a print in a book unless you're willing to pay thousands of dollars for a high-end tritone or duotone offset printing press. These books are done on a digital press, which allows you to do a much shorter run at a much more reasonable cost. You're going to have to make some compromises, but for the most part, the quality of it is good enough to put together a quality book. In the Keith Carter book, I thought some of the images were a little too dark and contrasty, and I thought, okay, well, you know, that's that give and take thing, and that's what it is understanding that what you want to do is you want to put out images that are accurate representations of the photograph. It may not be perfect, but is it an accurate representation? And I think if it pulls that off, if it looks close enough to what the photograph is, then I think that's acceptable, because I've seen a good example of that is Diane Arbus's monograph. I have a paperback copy and I've got a hardback copy that was like a 20th anniversary. And you would think that the 20th anniversary hardback book would be, you know, just have these spectacular reproductions. They're awful. They're contrasty, they're muddy, and the ones in my old original softback one are a lot better. They're a little bit softer, but there's more detail in the shadows, and they were done with an offset printing press. And so even then, people like Diane Arbus, whose foundation has plenty of money to spend on books, you know, you can't always be guaranteed perfect quality. And I've seen her prints, and of course the prints don't look anything like what you see in the book. But again, it's that, is it an accurate representation? And it's also, having those books is, you know, it's a way to put your work out there. It's a promotional tool. It's a way for people to look at your work. It's a way for people to have your work. And again, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so you got to go through the whole process of putting the images through Photoshop, basically, so that you can get them adjusted for the book. All the pictures in the book were shot on film. I developed the film myself and scanned all of the images myself, cleaned all of them up. They were scanned to be printed at, usually the minimum is 300 to 350 dpi. I actually scanned them higher than that. everything was, I worked in sRGB. Later you have to convert them to CMYK to be printed in the book. For black and white images, the way I scan them, I actually scan them as positives rather than a negative. Something about using the positive scan on most flatbed scanners uses all of the sensor, and so you get all of that shadow and highlight detail that you seem to lose in the negative scanning software. I've never figured out what the difference between the two is, but I came across this site online talking about the best way to scan black and white negatives, do it as a positive, and then invert it in Photoshop. And I also tend to scan kind of low contrast. The film I use and the developer's D76, it's a divided D76 that kind of compresses the highlights. But a flat scan, it's much easier to add contrast than it is to get rid of contrast. So you can really bring that shadow detail up and keep those highlights in check. And so for doing this, like the highlights in that TP and then the shadow area, really being able to keep that in check. Also, you know, I also dodge, burn, and do all of the things you would do in a darkroom. It's kind of having both feet, one foot in the digital world and the other foot in the film world. So let me look at my notes again.
When you say dodge and burn, are you talking about in Photoshop?
In Photoshop. Yeah, I would take each scan and invert it to a positive image, which is a PSD, Photoshop document, and I would do the dodge, burn, contrast, you know, any sort of, you know,
So you don't
image
dodge, burn,
control.
film anything?
No, I gave up my darkroom years ago. It got to the point where printing on paper, one, it's expensive, and two, getting everything set up to do it and everything, it was just cost prohibitive, time prohibitive. And then I've done a photo blog for almost 8 years, and being able to have constant photographs, it's just like, I can't do this anymore. It's either do it digitally on that end of it, or I won't do anything. So I'm much more productive that way. I don't know that I'll ever print again. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but it's once the inkjet printers got to the point where they could print archivally, and they print on, I use that hand-and-mule paper. It looks like and feels like fiber-based paper. I was like, I'm sold, you know. And galleries are accepting it, and so it works.
Basically, why shouldn't film and then do all your post-processing digitally as opposed to having a digital camera?
Okay, rather than, yeah, why do I shoot film
Yeah.
and then do it digital rather than just doing digital all the way? I like the way film looks. Film's got a particular look about it that digital doesn't. I shoot digital commercially. It looks too slick and clean to me. I know that sounds weird. And the process is different too. When you shoot with digital, you've got all of this memory space, and you can just click, 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 and with film, all these were shot on a Hasselblad. You've got 12 shots, and you really have to stop and think about what you're doing, how you compose the image, what, you know, and it's kind of, as silly as it sounds, kind of a Zen sort of thing. You're looking through that, and you've got this huge viewfinder, and it's much different. Everything's manual. There's nothing's automatic. So it's a different process, and plus shooting on film, you can scan it at any resolution, you know, where you're limited with digital depending on, you know, how big of a megapixel camera that you have. So it's like I was saying, having, you know, one foot in the film world and the other in the digital world, you know, shooting it on film, developing it, but then doing the post-production digitally because it's quicker and easier, and I can get the work out, you know, sooner. And plus you can replicate, you know, I can dodge and burn and mess with an image multiple times without wasting a, you know, box of $100 paper, you know, so that for my workflow, it works really well that way. So.
What resolution are you scanning them at?
I think I scanned them at 3200
Pretty big
DPI.
files.
Yeah, big files. And I worked with them all the way through InDesign. I imported them as PSDs rather than have them converted to JPEGs. So let me get on with the the other part. So I was talking about working in sRGB. You'll have to convert them over to a CMYK because that's how everything's printed. On the blurb thing, well, I'll kind of go briefly into that. They do that automatically for you. When you go to do a test book, which is something that I highly recommend, is you go online, they've got a little software that you can design your book, you bring your pictures in, it's real easy to use, and then it does all the background stuff for you. It converts everything over, you just upload it and send it. Now doing it this way, you're actually doing it the hard way because you have to convert all of these over to CMYK before you bring them into InDesign, which is what you'll lay the book out. And it's a pretty simple process. You just click, you've got this as a sRGB, and you go down, you click it over to convert to profile. And depending on who your printer is, they can send you a printer profile that you can put in your computer. Photoshop will have it on the drop-down menu. HP Indigo Press is the digital press that printed this book. You select that, it's going to convert your image for that particular CMYK. You want to use black point compensation is going to be checked. Intent is perceptual. Usually it will come up with, there's 4 others, but perceptual is usually the one for photography. So you go in, you convert all of the images over to CMYK. The other thing too is, and one of the complaints that I would read about stuff that people would have printed, especially through blurb, they'd get it back and it looked too dark. And the printing process has a tendency, and I've read stuff on other sites that I've had stuff printed, they'll say lighten your prints before you send them. So generally I would lighten by about whatever percentage that is, 0.10, 1.10. So in the mid-range, I would slide that over. For an image like that, 0.10 was good. If this was like a really dark image with a lot of shadows, I might even go up to 1.18 or 1.20 to lighten it up. And you can also use the shadow and highlight tool if you've got a lot of shadow area that you want to come. Because what happens in that printing process, it seems like it just, when the ink goes down, that it really darkens the shadows, and you want to be able to have a little bit of control over that. So by lightening everything by about that much is generally a good rule of thumb.
2 questions on
What?
the CMYK. Do you find was that darkening as a result of going to the CMYK? Or is
Yeah,
that
I saw no
is that
conversion. It's the printing. It's the printing process.
Okay. And when you went from sRGB to CMYK, you really didn't see a difference?
No, and the other thing too on this, I was working with everything in grayscale. Everything was in grayscale, converted it to a PSD grayscale to CMYK. Now I did warm the images up a little bit afterwards because I wanted them to have kind of a warmish tone, like the paper that I would print on. I added that after I converted them to CMYK. Oh, go ahead.
Do you do globally lighting? Do you ever do it local?
No, I've never messed with that. I've just used the general levels, and like I said, this was not anything I'd ever done before, so I was really just kind of making it up as I went. It was quite, it was a learning process.
Shannon?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you using the 80 millimeter with the Hasselblad?
Oh yeah, all these, a majority of the shots in this book were shot with the 80 millimeter lens. There were a few that I used a 120, but the majority of them I shot with my 503 CW with a 80 millimeter lens on it. And I've always been kind of a one film, one lens kind of shooter, so that's what I did.
Since you were scanning, why didn't you just go right into RGB instead of sRGB?
Oh well, you're right. It is RGB.
Oh.
It just when you look at it in Photoshop, it says sRGB.
No.
Oh really? Okay. Okay. Again.
1998.
Yeah.
Adobe RGB.
There you go. On this is for soft proofing. That's just a way to look at the images how they will look by using that particular printer profile. Depending on the printer profile, I've had some I've looked at where it does this drastic change in your image where it looks like really dark and you have to make adjustments for it. When I would plug in that particular printer profile, there wouldn't be very much of a change. There'd be a subtle bit of change. So that was okay. I knew I was pretty much on the right track. And we'll go on this. This site was of huge help. It's Cambridge Color. This has the total rundown of everything that I learned and needed to know about using the printer profiles, converting stuff, and going to print, understanding color spaces and everything. Because, like I said, there's so much information that I can't cram it all into this time frame. So this is a really good site for anybody serious about doing a book. Okay, now this is getting to actually laying it out in InDesign. I'm going to pick up where I left off. So after I did the blurb book, and I did a full-scale book like that through Blurb, I got it back, and it was perfect. I was amazed. I thought, okay, I'm going to put this up for sale on Blurb, and because at that point I really didn't know. I just wanted to know that I could get this process done. And up to that point, I hadn't done all of this. I had just done the basic, did everything in PSD, well, actually JPEG for the Blurb book, and got the test book made through them. The only problem was the cost. The problem with Blurb is they're making money off of you. You can mark up the book and make a little bit of money, but you're not gonna, you're gonna make a book so expensive that nobody is gonna want to buy it unless they just really, really like your photography. I think I have it down here what it originally. I think it was like $165 for one of these books through Blurb. I had it up for a week. 3 people bought it. I know of one person who contacted me afterwards. I was like, there's no way I can get this book to more people at $160. That's just ridiculous. And the reason is, Blurb is the middleman. They're sending, what they do is when you upload your files for a book, they send them to, they have multiple printers across the United States that they use, and whoever's got the load to get your book out with, because they try to do it within 2 weeks. So it goes to that printer and it gets shipped back to you in a couple of weeks. There's really not much quality control. So I was really surprised when I got that first book and I'd heard so many horror stories. The only problem was there was one page that had like a magenta ink smear on it that kind of marred the book. And so I thought, wow, Blurb is holding my book hostage. How can I make this book affordable but not spend a fortune on finding, a printer that I'm going to have to pay, thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, by chance, I got an email from one of my Flickr contacts, Joe Motel Rodeo. He told me about a printer in Boston called Acme Printing. And so he gave me the contact information, and I called Michelle, who was the salesperson that I spoke with, and we discussed what I wanted to do, and I sent her the Blurb book that I had so she could look at it. And so basically I was able to get a run of books where I could sell these for $66, which is pretty much on par for most photographic books that size. They're anywhere between $50 to $75. I thought, $66, that's a doable deal. And now here's the thing. You're not going to make money off of a photographic book. It's basically a wash for the most part. What I do with the money is I just turn it over to another run, my investment money, and do it again. Again, it's a tool, it's a promotion to put your work out there for other people to look at and to have your work. Did you have a question?
Yeah, was that your, forgive me for asking.
Go ahead.
Was that your cost? Or
My cost
yeah, just,
through Blurb?
no,
Acme. My cost for the first run of books they were about $50
for 100?
for one per book.
I mean, but did you order 100?
Yeah, actually the first one was 50. I sold out the 50 books, And then I did another run of 100, and the price of those came down. So, but that's a better deal than what the Blurb was, what I was doing. But of course, the nice thing about Blurb is they're selling your book. They have it online, so that's where, and I'll go into talking about creation of an actual, website and all of that. So at that point, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to have to do this all by hand. I'm going to have to learn to use InDesign, which it's an Adobe product. It was a lot like using Photoshop. It was easy to figure stuff out. One of the things that Blurb does offer, they do offer you to be able to design a book in InDesign and ship them or upload a PDF, print-ready PDF. The nice thing about doing this, you have total control over the project. Whatever you want to do. They had templates. They don't anymore. They now have a plug-in that has all of that stuff to use InDesign, which kind of is strange, but it's so that they can control the product. So basically, in InDesign, you just open a document setup, you put in your page count, page size, and everything. And at first this was a little overwhelming, but it was a lot like the software that I used on their site to lay out the book. So you basically set it up, and this just kind of gives you what it looks like, the title page. This is what it looks like when you're using the grid where you can see where everything is. This shows your print lines. And in the Blurb online version of stuff has the same thing. So that's one of the nice things about playing with that is it kind of gives you a first-hand look at how this stuff works. But this is your safe line. Then you've got your bleed edge, and then the outer that's where things are going to be trimmed off. We'll go to the next page. This is your bleed. This is where you want to keep everything within this. And you can change these different looks of what you're looking at when you're working on it. And then you've got kind of like a little road map of all your different pages in that little box there.
Excuse me, the
Go ahead.
setup with the bleed
Mhm.
margins,
Mhm.
Is that something that you got from the
From the template?
This is just a template that was in there, or something that
They
you got from the...
actually the template that I used, Blurb had templates that you could download and use. And since I was using a 12-inch, I used that template initially. But you can adjust that however you want it in InDesign. And this is just basically what your page looks like when what it looks like when you lay out the pages. And again, I kept it really simple. You just got your state and the image going into the next one. Had a basic afterword at the end. That was really the only writing that was in the book. And then on the next page was a rundown of all of the index of all of the images and their locations by page number. And this is basically your dialog box for importing images into the document. I use PSDs. I didn't want any JPEG compression until I got it in here, because when you export it, it's going to export it as a JPEG. So I didn't want any compression until it got to the very last part of the process. One of the easiest things to do is to name every one of your images by the page it's going to be on. It's much easier to keep track of where you're going if you have them numbered like that. And you basically just drag and drop import your images in. Where it says show import options and replace selected item, basically what I did with these pages is you can create a master of each different kind of page you're going to use, and it may already have an image in it, so you always want to make sure you replace that selected item and then show the import options, because when you go to the next screen, you want the file that you're bringing in to use the document default, because you've embedded that CMYK profile in that image. You want it to keep that, and you also want to keep the image intent, the original, because if you don't, it's going to convert it to whatever is default in InDesign. Again, I learned all of this just by trial and error. When you get everything laid out, the last thing that you're going to do is you're going to make a PDF X3 file. This is what's going to go to the printer. And all of the other options under the compression, marks, and bleeds, all that stuff, that'll be something that the printer will tell you whether they want them or not. Basically just tells you page range, and you hit export, and it's going to export it out and create a PFX file. The other thing too is a whole nother separate file is going to be your cover. When I did my first test book through Blurb, I did the actual dust cover, and I liked it, but I like the idea of the wrap cover because it just makes it feel like it's a complete book, and rather than having that loose cover. So I went with the image wrap. So to do that, I had to have plenty of bleed, and you can see the bleed lines here, so that they can wrap the cover over, and they needed at least 1.5 inches to be able to wrap it over when they put the cover pages on the inside. But this is, again, just shows you the basic, layout of what it looks like. You get your front cover, your spine, and then your back. I didn't have anything on the spine either. We'll go to the next. And then this is again your bleed, and you can see how far out I had the bleed on that so that they had plenty of room to wrap that around. This is what your PDF file is going to look like. On the particular printer I used, they wanted the cut marks, and that's the trim marks for each page. And you look at this at an Acrobat. Here's another. This was a full page. You can see where the gutter is and your trim marks. Same thing with the 2 images. The final thing you're going to do before you send this to a printer is you're going to pre-flight. And basically what that means is it's going to run a test to make sure everything that you need in that file to be printed is there. So it's going to go through this process. You want to make sure it's compliant with the PDFX3 file, and you hit Analyze, and it's going to analyze every element in that file to make sure that all your fonts are there, all your images are there. And so you run that, comes up with a green check mark, you're good to go. PDFX3 is pretty much the standard printer PDF file, I guess. There's a couple of others, but everything that I came with, Blurb uses PDFX3, this printer used it, and a couple other research things I did. PDFX3 seems to be the standard for most PDF print-ready files.
The cut marks, did that happen automatically? InDesign does that?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. If I go back, well, I didn't have that screen up there, but yeah, there'll be a check box, and again, for those marks to be on there, the printer will specify what they want, because there's all these other trim marks and everything else, and Acme said all we want is the cut page marks, and that's all they needed on it. So I did several test books that I did with Blurb. My kids were reading them afterward, and they'd say, "Hey, Dad, you forgot something here," and I left out. I'm like, "Oh, so have other people read anything that you write in there to proofread it, because it's amazing. You can read something 100 times and miss one word, and somebody else reads it and they pick it up instantly. So it's because you look at it too much." So, and that's the other thing too, is have somebody else look at what you're doing. I had a designer friend of mine. When I got done, I had her go through the entire thing, the PDF file afterwards, and just kind of look through it to see if there was any glaring, mistakes or any layout things I could change. And she came across a few things that she thought I should change, but overall, she thought it worked out just fine.
Did you ever do a PDF test book to Blurb?
No, I never did a PDF test book. Once I found Acme, that was it. I was going with it, and I'll explain why in just a second. The other thing too, you want to get an ISBN number for your book. That's so it can be tracked. People can find it. It's really simple. This is the website you go to. It's called Boker, I think, .com. No, it's my identifier. I just put in ISBN number in Google, and guess this is what came up. They sell it as a batch of 10, or you can buy a single one, and a single one was like $125. And they also sell a barcode that you can put on the back. I think it's like $50 extra. I didn't buy it. I figured if it was something I needed down the line, I could buy that and use it as a sticker that could peel off the back, but I've had no use for the barcode. So that's basically how you get that. And this is for the website step, but we'll talk about the printer. So after you send the PDF, the printer is going to send you back an entire book in sheets, an unbound book. And that is for you to look at every page to see what the printing looks like, and that's basically your proof. And that's what you're going to sign off on. You'll also get a cover. They can do a total bound proof. Of course, they charge extra for binding it. I didn't have that done. I just had the pages sent and the cover sent. Blurb doesn't do a glossy like this. They do kind of a matte, and I like that matte finish, but Acme didn't have the same kind of papers and finish, so I went with the glossy. And after several test proofs, I probably went through 3 or 4 test proofs of the entire, well, 2 totals and then a couple of just different pages that I was having some issues with. But that's the luxury of using an actual printer, is that you can have control over what you're doing, because they're going to send you, and they're not going to print that book until you sign off the entire project fits your specifications and you're happy with it. And that was the thing. Plus the quality control too. You've got somebody, I mean, each book is going to be inspected. They're not, you're not going to get, a bunch of bad books. Some of the first test books I did through Blurb, I actually had to send them back because, you'd get one where the binding was off and this was, it was just atrocious how bad. They can do good on like one book, but then you try to order multiple, it was just a mess. So you'll get your you get the final test thing, you sign off on it. So I got my first run. It was in the June, and they crammed it out at the last minute. The Route 66 Festival was in Amarillo last year, and so that was an appropriate place to have a kickoff for the book. So I had a booth there, and I sold the first set of books there. And then the majority of them I sell online. I created a website, and I don't know how many of you've done websites before. Again, that was something else when I do commercial photography, and years ago, when the internet was really becoming a way of doing everything these days, I thought, well, I'll pay somebody to do it. And after talking to a couple of people, I thought, I can just buy the software and learn it. So I've been doing it myself. If I can do it myself, I do it. So anyway, I created a website specifically for the book, and just very simple. You get a basically introduction page. I got a great review from the guy that runs Route 66 News, so I put that on there, and did a little thing where I show some of the pages of the book. I didn't put the entire book. I've seen some sites where people put the entire book, and I thought, no, that's overkill. Just trying to keep it simple. And that just shows what the pages look like if you're flipping through it. Then you have your order page. And of course, everything online is pretty much done through PayPal. So I set up a PayPal page where they just click on that and check out. Now here's the thing about the shipping. The nice thing about books through U.S. mail is called media mail, and it's the least expensive way to ship. You can't ship anything but the book. I can send those books for roughly $3. Yeah, anywhere in the United States.
How much?
$3, basically. It weighs about 3 pounds.
Is it per pound or is it just a flat?
It's a flat rate per pound, but the weight of that book. Now here's where it gets expensive. For people who buy it overseas, it costs $32.50 to ship that book, because it's got to stay under 4 pounds, and it just barely stays under that once you get it in. I found that was the other thing too, was I found some specifically sized boxes that are just a little bit larger than the book that it fits in perfectly, so it makes shipping very easy. But to ship overseas, I have to use international first class, and it has to be under 4 pounds, and it has to be a specific size. It doesn't exceed the size, and keeping it under the weight. And that's the only way to ship it overseas. Amazon, unfortunately, they have great deals, and they can ship stuff for dirt cheap over there, and can't do that here. So Canada is a little bit cheaper. You can send it through postal service, and I think it runs about $12 to $16 to ship to Canada, but everywhere else in the world is expensive. But the nice thing about it's $32.50 anywhere. It doesn't vary. You know, you can send it to Japan or Australia, and ironically enough, I'd say half of what I sold has been overseas because Route 66 is quite a draw for people overseas. It never fails. Anytime I've been making the trip, I've always run into people from Europe, Australia, Japan, everywhere. I was fortunate enough to have Photo Eye bookstore pick the book up at the end of the year, and they've been selling it through their store. They sell it for the same price. They just send me a PO and I send them however many books, and then every 3 months they send me a check for the books. Using Facebook, this was another thing too. I put a Facebook page together for it, joined as many Route 66 organizations, anything that had anything to do with Route 66 to generate interest and whatnot for people to find it. And that's the other thing about the online presence. The more things you have online out there for Google to pick up, because that's how everybody Googles everything, so having a Facebook page is always a good thing to promote stuff, even if you hate it. Flickr, again, another free way to promote stuff. In conjunction with my photo blog, everything I put on my photo blog, I put on my Flickr page. I have lots of people who look at that, so I'm sure quite a few people who bought the book saw it on my Flickr page, so I made an announcement there. And that's on my photo blog. The people that follow that can find it. And so that's the end of that slide. Yeah, what else have I got? That's a good question. Marketing through Amazon. I looked into Amazon, and basically I would be paying Amazon to sell my book. The cost that, and they do, they do offer everybody a way to sell things on there, and the cost, because they're shipping and everything, and I forget all the details, but it was very cost prohibitive to try to do a deal through Amazon, because I have people go, oh, can I buy it through Amazon? I'm like, no, it's only available through my website or through the Photo Eye. So, but yeah, that's a good question.
eBay?
On eBay, no, I've never used eBay. I buy camera equipment off of eBay, and so I've never sold the books on eBay at all. Why do I use D76? I used to shoot on 320 Tri-X until they discontinued it. I guess the main reason is it really, like I was talking about, it really compresses the highlights. I don't know if you've ever used it before. D76, the regular developer, well, it has a tendency to, you use it, and I forget the exact details, something chemically changes in it, increases contrast, but they're divided into two baths. The first bath is developer basically just soaks into the film, and the second one is actually the developer, and it's not a contrasty developer. It is kind of a flat developer, but since I scan kind of flat too, you retain everything, and you can add all of that contrast in Photoshop. So for my workflow, that works great. And of course, I buy it from the Photographer's Formulary. That's where I found out about it. So, and I've used it for years, and it's a pretty easy developer to use. Yeah, it's funny. I felt like I had a ton of stuff to talk about, and I'm like ripped through all these slides. So I'm trying to think of what else I was going to.
Have you ever considered electronic?
Have I? Oh yeah, the electronic books. Yeah, that's something I've thought about. People could look at them on their iPad and stuff. And of course, it seems like I keep mentioning Blurb because they started doing that. Yeah, I looked into some of the design software initially and kind of played with it, but it wasn't anything that I guess captured my attention enough to want to play with it anymore. You know, possibly, maybe down the road it might be something that I do, but.
What about copy and writing the pictures? Do you do that?
Well, and that, yeah, actually copyright, I haven't done anything official. I mean, generally if you put copyright, your name and year, which everything is in the back of the book, all rights reserved, basically copyrights the images. I
So
know.
like when you're doing these test books, you're not afraid of somebody stealing the images and
I guess I'm trusting, yeah, whoever I sent, yeah, that they're not
There is
gonna,
a risk.
yeah, there is a risk, yeah. Because I read stuff on Flickr all the time about people seeing that somebody's used their image on something and they didn't give them approval for it. I haven't run into that, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody had. But you know, what can you do? I do a lot of photography for artists in town, and one of the few last things I used to shoot 4x5 film for, and he was at a flea market, and somebody was selling reproductions of his work. And so they scared the poor guy to death, and he called his agent, and they got hold of him, and they were being made in China or something. So yeah, I've wondered about that. If you know, somebody gets hold of it, and then they're passing it off as their own. So I mean, what can you do? So.
Did you copyright them in Washington?
No, I've read about that, but my general understanding of copyright, and even on, you know, on Flickr, when you click what, you know, however you want the images to be used, if it says, and even I sell stuff through Getty, and you know, there's, you know, you have to copyright the image, and you put the copyright, you know, you can put the little logo, or you can put copyright and your name, and they'll consider that as so. But I know what you're talking about.
Because the
Make a correction.
Go ahead.
Copyright, that is true, that all you have to do to register something as copyright, to say it's copyright, is to put your name, the date, and a copyright edition on an image. But if someone takes your image and you want to sue, if you have not registered it,
Okay.
then you can't get damages. You can only get back what the cost of the usage would be. So you
Right.
can't get a lawyer to take it on contingency. So your best bet is to copyright by registering with the Copyright Office. We actually have a video online that shows you how to do it. Because a minimum damages, if it's registered before being stolen, is $100,000.
Wow.
But if you have not registered, you might just get like $1,000, and it will cost you more to hire a lawyer.
Right.
So.
Well, that's good. Yeah, because again, I've never looked in the full copyright. I knew that basic little bit. And the thing about photographic books is they're expensive to produce. They don't make a lot of money, and I think it's even photographers' work. I remember reading this sometime. I mean, it's really a narrow audience that you're selling to. The nice thing about this, for a first project, is it's got kind of universal appeal. I mean, everybody knows what Route 66 is, so it was kind of a great project to do. It was convenient for me because living in Amarillo, halfway between the two, and putting it together. So that really worked out well. And then it having the, you know, the appeal of being something that was popular. Whereas if you're doing something, this other project I've been working on for the last several years, Texas is a Fine Place to Die. You know, that's a more narrow audience. You know, you know. And you know, and in Texas, it would probably go over very well. But the interesting thing about that project is the title, and I've had people ask me where did that title come from. It was actually a guy in Europe somewhere had seen one of the photographs of this old car that was falling apart behind this old fence, and he said, "Texas is a fine place to die," and I thought that's a great title, and so. I thought, okay, so I kind of, and that's been a slow progress, you know. But again, Texas has got an allure of being bigger than everything, and there's an element of, I guess, appeal to that too, especially. And again, you know, it's all black and white, and kind of capturing the way Texas looked in between the Wild West days and the current. There's this time frame in there that elements of that part of Texas are still there. They're fading fast. Again, it's like this, trying to shoot something before it's gone, and documenting it, and being able to get it out there for other people. And that's the thing about self-publishing and putting things out for other people. Like I said, you know, I don't have access to, you know, a lot of galleries like here in New York. You can go anywhere and see people's work, and we do have an art museum in Amarillo, and they do get stuff, you know, from time to time. But, you know, I've always lived through, photographic books. Anytime, especially in Santa Fe at the Photo Eye there, they've always got such great books, and so I've collected books over the years, and those have always been my gallery. So that's a great way for other people to see your work and own it.
Shannon, can you talk a little bit about your approach to making images, and maybe even a little bit about some of your newer work?
Sure.
Photographing people?
Photographing people and some of my newer work. That's something, especially people, and I actually photographed a guy today outside of Starbucks. Yeah, I'll have people comment, and it's interesting. Some people will say, I can never photograph people. Approaching a total stranger is kind of like an odd or terrifying experience. When I took that workshop in Santa Fe, the guy said that fear of photographing people never goes away. And it's true. You never get over it. It's like I'll go through a time period where I haven't photographed anybody for a while, and getting that nerve up to go up and say, hey, because I always ask. I never just walk up and shoot. I can't. I have to interact with the people, and at least, and I'll say something like, hey, I like what you're wearing. That looks pretty cool. Or that's, or I like this element that you're in. It just really, and most of the time people are flattered and they'll oblige. And there's some people that just flat turn me down. They don't want to be bothered. Because a lot of the books I looked at were travel books. And there's some good ones out there. And there's a few, coffee table type books. And I wanted something different that was not a travel book or, well, I guess you can call it a coffee table book. That's kind of just a generic term. But there's none that are done in black and white, and there's none done in this kind of style and look. And so that was the other important thing about it, was that something that separated it from all the other things that are out there. And that's the other thing too, working on your own project is finding, how you want to put that book together that's different, but maybe the same as other books that you look at. Like I said, I looked at a lot of, the books that I have and other books that I would see in bookstores and libraries, trying to get a look and feel. And like the cover of this, I had another image in mind. It was actually a shot down Route 66, and that was one of the things about looking at other books was I saw a lot of other Route 66 books with basically the same image of looking down, 66 where it had the 66 painted in the road. And I thought, no, I want to use something else. And ironically, the cover of this, that's an actual Route 66 shield. I was doing a photo shoot for I'm trying to remember if it was CPA's or a title company actually in Amarillo. And in one of their boardrooms, they had that shield in this framed mount in their boardroom. And I said, do you mind if I come back and photograph that? I just wanted to shoot it. And it actually says Texas at the top, and I framed it where it didn't have it. But that's the original shield with the glass beads in it that would reflect, and it's actually two pieces of steel. The 66 is cut out and they pressed them together. And when I developed the film and I scanned it and I saw that, I said, that's the cover. I instantly, it just said what I wanted it to say. So I thought, well, that worked good. So that's the other thing is, having a strong image, because there was part of me that some of the other books I would look at had no photographs. They were just simply text. It would just say, well, like again, I'm going back to the Keith Carter book, it just said The Blue Man, and then you open it and there's actually some images, and then you go into the photographs. But I think a good strong image for the cover is always a good way to catch people's attention and kind of give them an idea what they're looking at.
Acme Printing, are they only online, or do they have a brick and mortar? I'm just saying.
Yeah, Acme Printing. Oh, Acme Printing. If you put in Acme Printing in Google, it'll come up. Actually, it's Acme Bookbinding, and they're in Boston. And they're, from what Joe told me, they're the oldest family-owned book printers on the East Coast, and they did a really good job putting this together for me. Listen to me freaking out, multiple phone calls, when I would get approved saying this color's off on this page, it's too magenta. I mean, all the nitpicking and everything, and but they really worked hard to print me a book that I was happy with and to put out there.
What did you say the price per book was for the 100-book run?
The price per book for a run of 100 at this size was $47. So, and I'm selling it for $66. So there's a little bit, you know. So I'm making it's 12 by 12. It's 160 pages. Yeah. So it's a pretty good size book. You know, a lot of people do smaller books, and I thought about doing smaller books. I thought about doing lots of different, you know, soft covers, you know, but I thought no. They just, seeing that picture that big, it just has some sort of impact that in a smaller scale it just lost. And so I thought, well, you know, I'm only going to do this once. I might as well, you know, I didn't want to compromise on that end of it. I wanted it to be that large size, and so it worked out well being that way. So, and I think, well, okay. Any other questions? Go ahead. No, that's a good question. A lot of it depends on their schedule for the turnaround. I had plenty of time up until the festival, and since I knew I had so much time going because the festival was in June, and I had basically 4 months because I started in February. And so I was able to kind of take my time. They can fit a particular time frame if you need it to be, you know. Of course, they probably charge extra if you need it in a rush. But I got the books several days right before the actual.
4 months. I'm talking actually. Let's say if you sold 100 copies, and then for the reprinting.
Oh, for me to do like a reprint? How much? How long? When I did a reprint, I didn't have to do anything other than call them up and say I need a reprint. And so what they did was they sent me a new set of proofs, and I looked through. Yeah, it was about a couple weeks, and it was probably a month later I had another run. And in between that, selling out the first run and then the second run, I actually sold books I didn't have yet. I was actually doing a photo shoot, assisting for a lady, I think of her name, but she's a photographer here in New York, was in Amarillo doing a photo shoot. She hired me as an assistant. And it was for a pharmaceutical company that was having a huge conference there at a motel, and she was shooting some of their different clients. And a lot of them were from out of town, and they were all eating up the Route 66 thing, and I told them about my book, and so the advertising agency ended up buying like 20 books, and I only had maybe half that. So I got the second run going, and that right there paid for part of that second run. So they had to wait until I got the other books in to, actually I waited until I got them all in and shipped them to them. But the whole thing is just, you know, there's been a learning experience, and I'm still learning. You know, you never figure anything out totally. You just keep doing it, keep plugging away, and trying to find ways to put your work out there. Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming out. This has been great. I never imagined I would ever be here to do something like this, so I appreciate your questions and comments, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. So,
Thanks very
cool.
much for making the drive over.
Oh, you bet.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.